Hi guys, and welcome to another Cardiff Sports Nutrition video. Following up on the video we did last week regarding macronutrients, we're going to, over the next 3 videos, break it down and talk about each one of the main macronutrients. So today we're going to talk about protein and talk about it in a larger scope, what exactly it does. We slightly touched on protein in regards to fat loss in the last video regarding how important it is when dieting in terms of satiety, keeping you fuller for longer, and also the effect on protein, its thermogenic effect, so how it can actually help increase your metabolism. But today we're going to go in a bit more depth and talk about protein in a larger spectrum. So Paul, if you'd like to just talk about a few things, that would be brilliant.
Okay, so fundamentally what is protein? Well, protein is long chains of amino acids that are joined together, and that's how it's stored in our food. So once we've eaten, body breaks them down, we get amino acids that are absorbed into our bloodstream. So what do these amino acids do? Well, they actually do lots of things. A lot of our body is composed of proteins, or proteins are involved in a lot of the physiological processes within the body. For example, enzymes, which are basically, if we didn't have enzymes, which are used as catalysts, they speed up reactions. If we didn't have those things, basically wouldn't exist. So proteins aren't just important for muscle building, they're important for a whole host of things as well. So if we think about hormones, which are important cell signalers within the body, some of them are made up of proteins as well. So for example, a growth hormone is a long chain of amino acids, 181 of them in fact, so that's an important one obviously for stimulating muscle growth, recovery and so on and so forth. So like I say, they also play roles in many signalers, they play roles in the structure of many cells as well, but fundamentally what we're interested in for you guys at home, and I'm sure you guys are, is to think about them in terms of muscle building. So in terms of muscle building, we need to think about different amino acids and what they do. So there's 20 amino acids in total that we get, and 9 of them are what we call essential amino acids. So in the same way that we say protein is essential, it's technically true, but actually it's these 9 amino acids that are essential. And then there's 6 conditionally essential amino acids. So conditionally essential means that in certain situations, when there's a lot of demand maybe or stress placed on the body, we might have more of a requirement for these other 6. And then there's 5 which are non-conditional amino acids. So these can be synthesized through other mechanisms to be produced in the body if and when we need them. So in terms of muscle growth, it's the essential ones that really are the important ones for stimulating what is called muscle protein synthesis, okay? So muscle protein synthesis is a process by which we get muscle accretion. So muscle accretion is just the posh term for saying, building muscle, okay? Muscle hypertrophy. And of these, there's one which gets a particular lot of interest, which is the amino acid leucine, okay? Now, leucine is what's known as a protein trigger, or a muscle protein synthesis trigger, sorry. And in short, what that means is that, imagine you're trying to make music, okay? And leucine is the conductor of the orchestra. Now, the orchestra is your other amino acids. Now, the conductor needs to be there to actually make them play the music, the muscle building music in this case. But fundamentally, you can't have one without the other. So you can't necessarily have high amounts of leucine, which is important to trigger this muscle building process, without the others being present as well. So what we're looking for in terms of protein quality is we're looking for something which contains leucine, and we're looking for something which provides all the essential amino acids that are used to build muscle, okay? So where do we get those things from? Well, from a supplement perspective, we have things like essential amino acid powders, we have whey proteins, caseins. These are all sources of what are called complete amino acids with the high leucine content. There are some plant sources as well, like soy, which has moderate levels of leucine in it, which can be on the lower side, but also they do have a complete amino acid profile for vegetarians out there looking for those kinds of sources. But fundamentally, it's the leucine that guides these processes. So, sorry, didn't finish with foods there. So things like anything which is meat-based, anything which is dairy-based. Plants generally, they have amino acids, but they don't have high levels of leucine in them as well. So we need to make sure we're getting the 2 indicators of protein quality, which are leucine content and a complete spectrum of amino acids, okay? So, well, how much protein do we need? Well, we're going to forget about the daily intakes, because we're going to talk about daily intakes when we talk later on about different maybe nutritional strategies depending on goals, which you covered a little bit in the first video, but I'm sure as this series goes on we'll get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty about those things. The real thing is it's usually about 2 to 3 grams of leucine per meal is enough to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and the research suggests that this needs to be stimulated every 4 to 6 hours to what we call optimally maximise muscle protein synthesis over the course of the day, okay? Again, not going to talk about meal frequency or anything like that, we'll get into those discussions later on, but fundamentally, when you're eating a protein source, you need to be getting about 3 grams of leucine combined with your full spectrum of amino acids. Again, well, how much is that? You're looking at around about maybe 20 to 30 grams of whey protein, 150 to 200 grams of various meats, depending on the quality of the meat, the amount of water containing them, and same with fish as well. So, you know, those are the sort of main sources where you should be getting your protein from. If not, we're going to do a whole other video at some point, I'm sure, on vegetarian and vegans and things like that as well, to help you guys out, to help you guys get the most of your muscle gain. So I think fundamentally, from my end on this video, what I want you to take from this is protein is more than just muscle, okay? So that's why, even though we grow muscle relatively slowly, we need a lot more protein in our diet compared to the amount of muscle we gain each day. I can't remember the exact number, but it's a multiple fold increase in the amount of protein we actually require to maintain tissue. It is extra that we actually extra put down in terms of lean muscle tissue. So I'll leave Matt to finish off on this video there on any of his thoughts, and I will speak to you all next week.
I think one more thing we'll just quickly finish on regarding protein, Paul. You mentioned in terms of optimal leucine and timings that you need to get at that optimum amount every, 4 to 6 hours? Mm-hmm. What is your view on post-workout protein? I mean, you know, a lot of people, you see they finish the workout, they get their protein down at that anabolic window, as we all speak. How important is a specific amount of protein post-workout, whether that be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, or later on in the day?
Okay, without trying to get into the complexities of this too much, in the post-workout window, when we perform muscle contractions, when we're performing resistance training, okay, or actually any kind of activity really, there is a trigger of the pathways that stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So in essence, the window isn't a defined 45-minute window or an hour window, but there is an essential window that it can vary, you know, estimates vary, but I'd say within 2 or 3 hours, you need to make sure you're getting a good quality source of protein in there, okay? Does that necessarily need to be whey protein? There's some arguments and debates around that. A lot of whether you use a whey protein supplement after you train will have a lot to do with the supplements you take intra-workout. So if you use, for example, an essential amino acid blend intra-workout, which provides you with all the amino acids, then, you know, post-workout shakes become less important. If you have a big meal before you train with lots of protein in it, then obviously by the time that's digested and absorbed, your amino acid levels in the blood are going to have risen. So therefore, your sort of intra and post-workout nutrition become a little bit less important, okay? Now, I don't want to say that it's not important, but when we're talking about the overall effects of diet, you know, I do think that as long as we're eating close enough to around our training, we just need to not get too obsessed about supplements in that sense. However, like for example, me personally, I really struggle to eat a large volume of food, especially after I train. There's a condition called, it's like exercise-induced anorexia. So basically, it's why a lot of people, once you've trained, you don't feel hungry. So in that window after you train, this concept of an anabolic window, there are a release of hormones and a cascade of physiological processes that are set in place that do require nutrients. How long that lasts is a matter of debate, and how influenced that would be compared to one protein source over another isn't fully elucidated yet, so we don't really know the answers to those things. It's a relatively modern area of research in terms of looking at it from a bodybuilding perspective. Most research isn't in bodybuilders because scientists are too busy trying to cure cancer and other things like that to be worried about whether we can gain muscle or not. So, you know, some people say yes, some people say no. It's likely to depend on a number of factors, including your genetics. If you've got a fast metabolism, you're probably going to, you know, turn over and break down a lot more protein. Your training volume as well. Over time, if you're a hard trainer, you're going to put more stress on your muscles. If you're a beginner, again, you're probably going to need to really focus a bit more on your recovery. But fundamentally, your protein sources through the day and consuming enough protein over the course of the day is going to be the main guide as whether you make progress or not. The supplementation and stuff, I do think it has benefits, but you know that you're talking about the 5% of the improvement there, not the 95% that comes from the rest of the diet.
I think with protein as well, like you were saying, it's depending on the way you, like I said, Paul, you said you don't necessarily get hungry post-workout. If that doesn't work for him, then like you say, optimally, it may be best to get it straight away, but if you would prefer to have that a few hours later, then go for it. So, for example, personally, I train first thing in the morning and I train on an empty stomach. I don't eat before because I'm not hungry first thing when I go to train. So personally, I would rather go and train on an empty stomach, finish, and then get a high amount of protein post-workout. For me, that works with me. It may not work for you. I know a lot of people would prefer to have a big meal before they train. And like Paul mentioned, having that high amount of protein in your pre-workout meal will mean post-workout nutrition isn't necessarily as important. So it's all about really fitting it into you, like how you like it. The best results are going to come by what suits you. So don't necessarily go by what people tell you, go by how you feel.
I think that's a really important point actually, and it's going to change even within you as an individual. As an example, if you're dieting for a show or a contest, for example, the temptation might be that you're going to want to use sort of faster digesting proteins to put those amino acids back in your bloodstream quicker to actually preserve and protect muscle tissue, so you're going to keep that muscle whilst you're dieting. However, for example, we talked about, so flashback to the last video and what Matt briefly mentioned at the start, protein is satiating, it gives you a feeling of fullness. So there's always going to be a trade-off where if you're eating X amount of protein per day, there's going to be a point where a whey protein shake, for example, is, yeah, that's great and it's tasty and that's beneficial maybe if you're trying to consume a lot of protein and you struggle to consume a lot of protein. However, on a diet, if I'm going to choose, say, 30 grams of whey protein and water over, say, maybe 200 grams of nice tasty sirloin steak, you know, when I'm dieting, I've got to think not just about the nutritional benefits and digestion and absorption rates and all the nitty-gritty science. I need to think about if I'm going to be able to stick to my diet without suffering too much by having maybe something which is steak-based, which is also going to have, you know, the associated kind of vitamins and minerals that you would find in meat that you don't necessarily get in sort of lotions and potions and powders and so on.
Brilliant. I think we'll leave it there. We won't touch on things about nutrient time. We'll have a whole different video of that where we'll start to look at nutrient timing, etc. We'll leave it there. Next week we'll move on to carbohydrates, and again just go into more depth on carbohydrates and on how important they are in your fitness goals. Thanks again, Paul, for coming in today. Thank you for watching, guys. Anything you'd like us to talk about, please comment below. Let us know. Anything you want, we'll be happy to talk about it. So yeah, thanks again.